Now, God would not make these kind of mistakes, man would. That's why I'm pointing these out to you, proving that this is all man-made.
What if I told you that what skeptics mocked as a mistake in the Qur'an for centuries turned out to be one of the greatest confirmations of its accuracy, thanks to a stone dug up in 1799? For centuries, many anti-Islamists pointed to a single verse in the Qur'an as proof that Prophet Muhammad must have copied stories from the Bible and confused his characters. The verse in question mentions a man named Haman in the court of Pharaoh during the time of Prophet Moses.
It confuses Pharaoh, the Tower of Babel, and Haman in chapter 28, verse 38, mentioning that Haman is an Egyptian. Chapter 40, verse 36 to 37, Pharaoh talks to Haman. The problem is, Egypt never built any towers, as according to this story. They built pyramids. More than that, we know that Haman was not an Egyptian name. It is a Persian name, and we see him referred to in the story of Esther in chapter 3, verse 1. Pharaoh lived in 1500 BC, whereas Haman, the Persian Haman, lived in 510 BC. They never met each other because there was about 1,000 years between them.
And yet, more than a millennium after the revelation of the Qur'an, the discovery of decoding of Egyptian hieroglyphics would uncover something astonishing, exactly the kind of truth the Qur'an had spoken of all along. Let's break down this story step by step. In Surah Al-Qasas, chapter 28, Allah, the one true God, recounts Pharaoh's arrogance and his command to his minister. And Pharaoh said, "O chiefs, I have not known you to have a god other than me. Then kindle for me, O Hāmān, upon the clay, and make for me a tower that I may look at the God of Moses. And indeed, I think he is among the liars." Here, Hāmān is described as a close official of Pharaoh, entrusted with construction projects. The Qur'an situates him in Egypt at the time of Moses in the service of the Pharaoh. But this mention seemed to clash with what was already known from Judeo-Christian scriptures. In the book of Esther, Old Testament, we find a completely different Haman. This Haman was a high-ranking official under the Persian king Xerxes, Ahasuerus, who ruled during the 5th century BCE, more than 1,000 years after Pharaoh and Moses. For centuries, anti-Islamists argued that Prophet Muhammad must have copied the Bible, misplaced characters, and mistakenly inserted a Persian figure into the Egyptian narrative. This, they claimed, was evidence of human error in the Qur'an.
Now, God would not make these kind of mistakes, man would. That's why I'm pointing these out to you, proving that this is all man-made.
But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. In 1799, during Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, French soldiers stumbled upon a large black stone near the town of Rosetta. This stone bore inscriptions in 3 scripts: ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic script, and Greek. Because scholars could still read Greek, they now had the key to unlock hieroglyphs, a language that had been dead for over 1,000 years. For centuries, no one could read the inscriptions left by the ancient Egyptians, but the Rosetta Stone changed everything. By the mid-1800s, scholars like Jean-François had cracked the code. As scholars translated Egyptian inscriptions, they discovered references to a name that sounded strikingly familiar: Haman. In the hieroglyphic records, Haman was connected with temple construction and building projects. He wasn't a Persian minister. He was an Egyptian official serving Pharaoh, overseeing monumental works. In other words, the Qur'an's description of Haman as Pharaoh's construction overseer was not an error. It was an accurate reflection of ancient Egyptian history, a history that had been completely inaccessible to Arabs in 7th century Arabia. How could Prophet Muhammad have known? Let's take a look at the timeline. Hieroglyphs. This writing system had been a lost language for nearly 1,000 years before the Qur'an was revealed. Nobody in Arabia could read or understand it. The Bible mentions a Persian Haman under Xerxes, not an Egyptian Haman under Pharaoh. The Qur'an mentions Haman as Pharaoh's official in charge of building projects centuries before scholars could verify it. So how could Prophet Muhammad, who was an unlettered man in 7th century Mecca, have known about an Egyptian court official named Haman and his connection to construction? If the Prophet had copied from Jewish or Christian sources, he would have repeated the biblical placement of Haman in Persia, not relocated him to Egypt. The answer is he couldn't have known, unless it was revealed to him by the God. Do they not then reflect upon the Qur'an? If it had been from anyone other than Allah, they would have surely found therein much contradiction, discrepancy. We will show them our signs in the universe and within their own selves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Is it not enough concerning your Lord that He is, over all things, a witness?
Like, share, and subscribe to Truth Shall Prevail.